Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. It depends where you are. I'm here today with Lana Jelenjev,
Jelenjev, yeah.
and she's an expert creating communities. So it is really needed this in these days. So thank you for being here with us, Lana. Hello, how are you?
thank, thank you for having me here, Gemma.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Well, she's an expert in creating communities, and she's known as the community alchemist. So why is the community alchemist? Why is
Mm,
that?
yeah, thank you for asking me that. So when I was thinking about, what is it that I love when it comes to working with communities, for me, the word that really resonates is the transformation that communities can bring. And with that, it's like, oh, when you think of alchemy is really transformation, the transformative power of different elements. So yeah, that just got stuck, and I love talking about communities as spaces for change and transformation.
Mhm. And can you tell us a little about your background, about who you are, and why did you came to creating communities and all this, so then the audience can know?
Yeah, so I've been in the education field for quite a long time. So I've had experience in creating curriculum programs, so opening up schools, even when I was in Indonesia and in the Philippines. So I'm originally from the Philippines.
Hmm.
So I've been training teachers, creating progressive curriculum programs for different for different organizations. And then about 13 years ago, I moved here in the Netherlands, and I had to, yeah, reevaluate in terms of where do I really want to show up, in what field. And yeah, at first I was going through, the same motion of, oh, serving teachers, serving schools or nonprofit organizations within their curriculum design. And that felt heavy at the time when I had my breast cancer diagnosis,
Yeah.
and that shifted a lot of things for me in terms of this questioning of how would I want to live a legacy, not live behind a
Hmm.
legacy but live a legacy. And it just came back, in terms of the kind of work that I love doing when I was back in the Philippines. It has always been people focused. It has always been within different social settings. So for me, it just became natural that I gravitated towards learning experience design, from the education side,
Hmm.
and the community building side, which is more on the people facing side. So for me, I see it as that intersection between education and community development. And it has been an exciting field. Mostly I'm focused on online learning communities because of
Hmm.
my work with Dreamsy Do. And yeah, and I also have clients who are not, within online learning communities, but really having their own community programs that involves face-to-face interaction. So this for me was the exciting part of, yeah, how to design the learning experience, how to design the engaging experience, and at the same time to help different organizations, different companies, to define what community means for them.
Yeah, that's important because what does community building means for you? When someone tells you about community building, what it is?
Yeah, so when I think about community building, I'm reminded of Filipino psychology. And in Filipino psychology, we have the terms loob and kapwa. And
Kapwa.
and when you think about those terms, it really has something to do with the self, which
Hmm.
is your loob, and then that expression of shared inner self, which is your
Hmm.
kapwa. So for me, communities are really the roots of our loob and kapwa, in how it transforms us, how it changes us in different ways, like, our heightened sensitivity to the needs of others and to our needs as well.
Hmm.
And this is why the loob is very important. Ourselves are very important. So
Yes.
so a lot of the work that I also do within organizations is to look at, what's your role as a leader in the community? How do you bring your full selves in these spaces? So for me, this is what community building is all about. It's the root of ourselves, and also our shared inner self,
Hmm.
that is expressed through others. And the fascinating part for me was when I connected with Filipino psychology, is it also connects me with, yeah, this indigenous understanding of, what's this, camaraderie, which we have a term called bayanihan, of how we help each other out, how we support each other,
Hmm.
and in that sense, be in community with each other.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really important. Yeah, and do you think, in regarding to this, do you think it's a difference depending in the country you are? For example, if you compare the Netherlands or the
I
Philippines?
would, I would say yes. The expression is different mainly because of the cultural lens.
Hmm.
The Philippines being a very extended, country,
Hmm.
culture, so we're so ingrained within the philosophy of the we, and yeah, countries like the Netherlands is the opposite.
Yes.
Very much
Yes.
the philosophy of the I, of the
Hmm.
self. So for me, there's really a different, the different lens as to which people bring in their understanding of community,
Hmm.
which is also why for me it's also an exciting space in the sense of, yeah, how can we bring about more, we-ness in cultures like the Netherlands, and how can we say bring in more self orientation in communities, or cultures like the Philippines. So it's that perpetual, balancing act of the loob and the kapwa.
Yes, exactly. Because yeah, well, I'm from Spain, so in the Spain is more or less like Philippines. We are we. So
Oh
it's also
yeah,
I feel the difference also here. That's why I
yeah.
asked you. And what are the three top recommendations for the new community buildings?
Well, for those who are, building their communities, and this is also something that me and my co-writer, Mika Leonon, wrote in our book Community Builders, Designing Communities for Change. One is definitely start with who. I learned this
Hmm.
philosophy from one of my mentors, Michelle Bachman, and this idea of not starting with why, but starting with who really resonated with me. That when we're looking at communities, we're thinking about people. Who do we want to
Hmm.
serve? Who do we want to, yeah, who do we want to convene? Who do we want to be in community with? And defining that is very important, because it helps you to set boundaries. It helps you to, put a lens in which, I'm reminded of Pia Parker's book and the Art of Gathering, wherein she said, like, uh, exclusivity is kindness. So how can we
Yes.
be kind? How can we be kind in those that we convene? How can we be kind in those that we put together in our community? So because we know who they are, we are most likely able to say, okay, this is how we can be in community with each other. So
Hmm.
start with who is definitely the first one. um Deepen the why is another part. For a lot of community managers or a lot of communities, they have such a deeply rooted purpose,
Hmm.
and that is essential. That purpose is definitely essential, because again, if you're thinking about communities that drive change, you'd want to have a rallying cry. You'd
Hmm.
want to be able to say, okay, this is how we would want to steer you to this specific direction. So when we're looking at the why itself, is also thinking about what's the theory of change. What is the transformation that I'm bringing them to?
Hmm.
What is this journey in the first
Yes.
place? And when you're very clear with your why, you can then envision, you can imagine what these possibilities are. And in such a way of being clear with this how, you're also clear with this is, this is the pathway, this is the journey, and this is, the points that we would be journeying along together. And then the last one, so from starting with why, starting with who, deepening your why. Then the third one would be, uh, explore the how. Be experimental in looking at how can I engage people, how can I invite, different voices in the community, how can I say, create learning experiences or experiences within the community that is memorable. I love the book The Power of Moments, mainly because
Mhm.
it helps us to define, what are the peaks in a community, what are the pits, what are the transitions, what are the bridges that happen, because we're looking at people in cycles, in different stages in their lives. They
Mhm.
have different strengths, they have different needs. So how can we surface that, and in the in this place of knowing and understanding and experimenting with how, we are better, we can better think about, in terms of, yeah, how do we assess engagement, how do we define our metrics, how do we know that we are reaching our goals, or
Mhm.
how do we know that we're progressing as a community. And there are also questions like, how do we onboard people, when they come in as part of the community, how do we exit people when they
Mhm.
want to leave. So there's a lot of different nuances in the how, and oftentimes, when we're just focused on, oh, I just want engagement, we need to look at this full spectrum in terms of where they are at, in the different stages. So yeah, those are the top three tips.
Yeah, I have a question about it also because some people get confused with community and audience, and it's different. Yeah.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I think this is also the, what's this, with the emergence of brand communities.
Mhm.
We're in it, it's really a pool of, okay, this is my business and I want to create a community out of it. Or yeah, I'd want to be able to, um to sell my programs, my services in the community. In one of the tools in our book, we've emphasized about the idea of how can we go from transactionalism to transformational.
Mhm.
And when we look at it from that lens of, from transactional to transformational, we get into different areas like, how would leadership look like in a transformational space?
Mhm.
How would communication flow in a transformational space? How would, what's this, how would channels look like in a transformational space? So there's different criteria wherein we look at, this lens of transformation. And oftentimes this is also what I've noticed, that it's okay to, to say there are transactional activities in
Mhm.
a community,
Yes.
but let's not be stuck with just that.
Mhm.
That when you're trying to cultivate the community, say, growing an audience for yourself, you can then look at, how can I look at this from a lens of transformation? How can
Mhm.
I invite more people in? How can I make it a voice of we? So this for me is that crucial part. If we're thinking about, is this really a community or is this an audience?
Yes.
um the main lens that I would then ask is, yeah, is this a transactional or is it
Yeah.
transformation? And in what ways, in what ways is it transactional, in what ways is it transformational? And then how can I, how might I be able to encourage more transformational lens within the community?
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. It's really interesting. Yeah, because this is something that a lot of people get confused with this those terms. Yeah, and what can you give as a strategy for season community builders in this time of pandemic we are living now?
Yeah, it's definitely, this is something that I've been talking about, from other, from other interviews, in a sense of, let's look at communities from from a different model, and I use the
Hmm.
Saturn change model in looking at what's needed right now. So Saturn change model allows you to get a framework of it's a very very simple framework. So you go from the late status quo, which for all of us collectively before COVID,
Yeah.
and then you have a foreign element that comes in. COVID comes in. You get a bit of a resistance up until a point that it entrusts you into chaos.
Yes.
And then from chaos, you try to do different things. You try to experiment. You try different ways of being to get out of chaos. So that entire space where we've been in for months is a space of chaos.
Yes.
And probably you've been hearing people say, "Oh, but I want to just go back to the old, to the
Yes.
old normal way," so that the late status quo. However, when we're looking at it from the Saturn change model, it's so difficult to go to the old ways.
Yes.
So what is needed from us is to be creative, to try out different ways, to see what would work, to experiment, so that we get to that aha moment, of like a transforming idea that says, oh, maybe if I try doing this more, maybe if I try participating more in my communities, or maybe if I try meditating more, so there's that then shift that happens in the mindset, in the perspective, and that transforming idea becomes then a catalyst for practice and integration. So you get into, okay, let me start doing this, my routine, or let me change things in what in how I attend to things. Um, and when you practice and integrate that, eventually it gets you to a new status quo,
Hmm.
which is very much different from the late status quo.
Yes.
And then you get into a cycle again. So it's just really like a spiral with all these different stages. And what I find valuable, if we think of what what we're going through in this time, this pandemic is really a place where we can look at what is it that we'd want to let go of, and
Hmm.
what is it that we'd want to
Yes.
take.
Yeah,
um,
that's
I'm
true.
I'm reminded oftentimes of, if we look at this, chaos that we're in, we might be holding on too much to the late status quo, that we fail to, to look at what is in my agency to be able to get through this.
Hmm.
And this is the same with individuals, with communities, right? If we look at it from that satire change model, your communities need different things in this space of
Hmm.
chaos.
Yes.
And they also have the strength and resources and resilience. So this is
Hmm.
also something that for me is crucial in this space of chaos. That as we think about chaos, let's also think about not just the needs but also the strengths. So
Hmm.
how can we amplify the strengths that are inherently there in our communities, and then from there, to say, okay, how can I also then attend to the emergent needs of the communities?
Hmm.
And it might mean that we're pivoting. It might mean that even if you say, oh, but my 5-year plan in my community is by now I'm doing this, is to say, okay, I'll be parking it, you know, and doing other things because this is what the community needs right now.
Yes.
And this pivoting, this allowing for emergence is another skill that we need at this time of pandemic. We need to be flexible. We need to be resilient enough to say, okay, if I've been doing this thing and it's not working,
Yeah.
don't keep on doing it. Try to find ways of doing things, right? So this is that invitation that for communities, what is really needed is experimentation. Trying out
Hmm.
things, being able to connect to the strengths and the needs of the community, and at the same time there's also that, allowing for emergence to happen. Yeah, I think this is what we forgot. We don't really have control.
Yes. True.
Control is a fallacy, that we have, and we think that we are in control. And yet, yeah, this pandemic is showing us how little control we have, and
Hmm.
then how do we attend? to these changes that happen, either globally or within ourselves. And then from there to say, okay, what is it that I would be doing to move myself self forward, to get
Hmm.
myself out of chaos. And this is also that interesting space where it's very important that we are doing things together, because the
Yes.
space of practice and integration is a space of accountability. Yeah. The
Hmm.
more that we say, okay, this is what we will be practicing now, or this is what we will be doing to help us ease out, like loneliness is very prevalent right now in communities,
Hmm.
and depression is very prevalent. So when we're trying to tackle this, mental health and wellness within communities, we get to think of how can we be supportive in such a way that whatever it is that we would be adding in as activities, encouraging in communities, that there is that accountability and support that is embedded immediately in what we're
Hmm.
doing. So as you can see in different stages, we have so many different options on how to respond.
Hmm.
And for me, it again boils down to understanding who we're designing things for, who we're convening,
Yes, important.
and I can go on.
No, it's really interesting. I just listening because it's true, and also like for example to ask them, to ask your community what they need, because sometimes what they needed before the pandemic is not the same that they need now, and you
Oh,
don't know.
definitely. Yeah,
So it's still
definitely.
always, yes, it's really interesting. I can be listening to you for hours, Lana. It's really interesting. And do you think what is the main difference to creating communities online when it was offline? What are the main differences?
Well, of course, there is there is a different connection when you do it face to face. Let's face it,
Hmm.
the what's this, the chemistry, the camaraderie, the closeness, the sense of belonging, it being being
Yes.
in the same space together is very hard to recreate.
Hmm.
However, it is still possible within online spaces. And I think
Hmm.
this is that, the invitation is not to think of the difference, but the invitation is to think of um, how can we make use of what we have right now.
Hmm.
And if online spaces are the spaces where we can connect, how can we shift our perspective on online spaces enough to say, this is something that I can try. Yeah, so
Hmm.
I've been
Yeah.
in different, Zoom calls where we would have birthday parties, we would have
Yes.
what's this, virtual gatherings. So you name it, different types of engagement, and at the same time, at the end of the day, you would still feel connected.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true.
and this is possible. This is the power of not being stuck with, oh, but this is not how I used to do it before,
Hmm. Yes.
but really going into in what ways can I think of other strategies. Yeah, and this is
Yes.
also why I love nonviolent communication, because conflict, happens in the level of
Hmm.
strategies, but also
Yes.
the creativity happens also in the level of strategies. So if you
Hmm.
say, okay, it's very important for me to be able to connect to people, how might I be able to do that online? In what ways can I design the interactive space as a space for, yeah, deep attunement with each other, or deep listening with each other? So
Hmm.
there are, and these are of course skills that we need to practice, as
Hmm.
facilitators, as those holding the spaces. Um and and I think that it's the openness to try and learn new ways of being.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And also, it helps us to expand the network because we can talk with people all over the world.
Oh,
So you have
definitely.
also advantages.
Definitely. We just hosted the Community Builder Summit a couple of weeks ago. And we were surprised that there were people coming in, joining us at 3 a.m. their time.
Wow, that's
And they
great.
stayed the entire, full day, 6.5 hours of what's this, workshops and keynote speakers. and they stayed and they loved it, for and for us it was like, oh, this is how meaningful it is for them to be able to take part in it. And this is the beauty that we see now, that everybody's online. And now a
Yes.
lot of people are online. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of people are
Hmm.
online. It has opened up the field. And at the same time, it's so instant to just get those connection, to be able to say, oh, I know this person in a specific level. And
Yes.
I'm also reminded, like Gemma, I mean, we met online first before we
Yeah,
met
that's
face to
true.
face.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Yeah, online I met a lot of people and really nice people. So this is really good. But yeah, it's true that some people is like a little like scared and they are not too, it's difficult to start, but once people start, I think they feel much better.
Yeah, and it is okay to be scared, and I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
there's also that realization that we are grieving. We are grieving from what was before.
Hmm.
How we've
Yes.
interacted with people, how we convened, in workshops, in gatherings, in spaces, actual spaces. So
Hmm.
I think there is, this invitation that I would love for community leaders to really take in is, how can we also offer our communities to be spaces for healing,
Hmm.
so that this grief that we carry as individuals and would most likely be felt in what's this and what's this felt and experienced by the collective. How can we surface those guilt, so that that grief, so that we can also as a collective, hold space for that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's
I
really
think
important.
this is that, you know um what's this challenge for
Yes.
community leaders, to look at it in the lens of me, as a community leader, being a healer within the communities that I'm part of.
Yes.
Because this is where we are right now. We're holding on so much grief, in terms of the way we worked before, the way we interacted, the way we did things.
Hmm.
And somehow we need to find, and cultivate those spaces, intentionally designed spaces, wherein this collective grief can be discussed. And this for me is like, this is that challenge for community leaders right now, of, while you are also tending to your own grief, to say, okay, how can I, intentionally engage and design those spaces where
Hmm.
where this healing can start.
Yeah, that's really important. Wow, thank you very much, Lana. If there is anything else that you would like to add, because I don't have more questions, but maybe there is something that I forget.
Well, I think for what's this again, going back to this, space of chaos. One of the things that I love as a reframing of this space of chaos is, it's also an invitation for growth. So
Hmm.
in the same way that there is post traumatic stress, there's also post traumatic growth.
Yes.
And for me, this is also that, of how can we lean into post traumatic growth within our communities. That even though there's a space of, that we're giving space to grief, we're giving space to healing, but there's also that lens of it. This is also a space for growth that
Mhm.
can happen, on an individual and a collective level. So it's
Oh,
holding, I see it as holding those two intentions of holding space for the grief, and then holding space to the possibilities that we have at our expense right now.
yeah, really good
and
point.
and what I love, as part of this, is to invite imagination in. How can we reimagine what is possible in this space of pandemic, in this space of COVID-19? How can
Mhm.
we reimagine what community means for us, how it feels for us, how we see it in
Mhm.
this new way of living that we're in? Because let's face it, COVID-19 is not going anywhere.
No,
you
no.
know it is something that we'd have to learn to live with.
Mhm.
And then in that, with that regard, how can we as a community be able to, yeah, get through this period and see each other, in a new status quo.
Yeah.
and
Try
and
to
we
make
can,
it easy.
exactly, and we can only do that together.
Mhm.
So this
Yes.
this type of growth, this type of collective, collective grief and collective change, we need to do it together.
Yes. Totally agree. Yes. So thank you very much, Lana. If you want, you can put in the comments in the video. You can put the link to your video to your book. Sorry, because I think it's really interesting. So maybe someone want to get your book.
Yes, I would definitely, I would definitely send it to you and put it
Okay.
in. And then, for those who are interested to also, yeah, learn more about community building, I also manage a community builders group in Facebook. So that's also another space where I share, share my insights and also experiences as a community builder. And then I'll also,
Yeah, you can share everything. Yes. Yeah, that's
I'll
right,
also
Lana.
share the
And
link to
also,
it as
and
well.
also, we didn't talk about it because it's not a community exactly, but you also have the base conference.
Yes, yes.
But
So
this is
that's
really
also
interesting. Also, we can do another video another day about the base conference
definitely,
because
definitely.
this is really interesting too. It can help many people.
Yes,
Okay,
thank
thank
you
you.
for having me here.
Thank you very much, Lana, for being here with us, for sharing all your knowledge, and hope to see you soon.
Yes.
Okay, bye.